Hi, this is Michaela Honauer. I'm happy to present our research on overcoming reserve supporting professional appropriation of interactive costumes today. The co-authors of this paper are Danielle Wilde and Eva Hornecker. Within the next couple of minutes, I will give you an overview of the research gap in experience and appropriation of wearable technologies by different stakeholders. Then I will introduce you into our case study in the performing arts and the methodological approach that we took. Afterwards, I will overview our insights into experiencing and appropriating wearable technologies by different types of stakeholders. In doing so, I will draw your attention on what we call professional reserve and polite indifference. And finally, I will speak about the implications of introducing wearable technologies successfully to different stakeholders and give an outlook on the relevance for other professional areas. The available timeframe of theatre production is usually between 6 to 12 weeks, including crafting and fitting of all costumes. The technical rehearsal is usually only a few days before the opening night, and the dress rehearsal only the day before. Imagine that interactive costumes are integrated into a production. This will take much more time and potentially influences and changes the processes behind. So far, research primarily investigates how performers as wearers are dealing with interactive costuming, and literature neglects how interactive costume impacts other stakeholders. For instance, secondary stakeholders such as choreographer or director need to integrate interactive costuming into the overall outcome of a performance show. Likewise, fellow dancers might also feel affected when presenting a role in parallel to an interactive costume on stage. Or behind the stage, tertiary stakeholders also need to work with interactive costuming. For instance, such costumes might have an impact on makeup artists, costuming or wardrobe staff. Or on other professionals behind the scenes, such as the stage manager, the technical staff, lighting designer or set designer. Our research questions are: first, how do primary, secondary and tertiary stakeholders in a professional theatre setting experience working with wearable technologies? And second, how do these stakeholders appropriate interactive costumes into existing practices? And how do they struggle with them? So our objective is to better understand how to support designers of interactive costumes and other creators to work within the professional theatre landscape, to enhance their experiences of wearables and to enable them to appropriate them into their professional practices. Let's have a closer look on our case study. This study is based on a 2-year collaboration with a local youth ballet company, during which we created and staged 3 interactive costumes for the Little Mermaid. The production involved around 100 professional and semi-professional dancers. We worked in close collaboration with the performers, the director-choreographer and the costume department. Interactive costumes were created for the antagonist of the leading role. It is the sea witch, as you can see her in the middle of this picture. And we created interactive costumes for 2 supporting roles, namely the jellyfish and the seahorse, as you can see on this slide. The jellyfish is on the left and the seahorse is on the right. The seahorse and the jellyfish are designed for implicit interaction. That means the performer does not need to actively concentrate on the interaction and the system reacts autonomous to the user's movements. As you can see in this picture that the colors are changing whilst the seahorse is turning to the side. I explain this to you because it's interesting to know when I will later speak about our findings. In contrast to the implicit interaction mode as just explained, the sea witch is designed for explicit interaction. That means the performer actively controls the system, so the dancer closes 2 fingers, the thumb and the middle finger, in the so-called ballet hand posture, as you can see in the pictures on the left side. Thanks to e-textile materials, this closes at the same time an electrical circuit and illuminates the bolero jacket, as you can see in the pictures on the right side. So what characterizes our research process and methodological approach? A model of the research process is shown in the picture on the left. For now, I cannot explain it in every detail because my speech time is limited here. But it is all described in our paper. So we conducted a longitudinal case study to realize an in-depth investigation over a period of around 2 years. Our emphasis is on qualitative data, and we used an action research approach for the fieldwork. Method triangulation enabled us to collect and combine multiple perspectives of stakeholders' experiences. Our data collection methods include interviews, informal conversations, observation, field notes, and a research diary. Our key stakeholders were the performers of SIGCHI, Jellyfish, Seahorse, the director-choreographer, the costuming and wardrobe staff, the lighting staff, and the fellow dancers. For our data analysis, we used thematic analysis and affinity diagramming. To guide the analysis of our data, we used a conceptual framework based on prior research, as it is illustrated in this graphic. The experience of interacting with a wearable costume comes first, as displayed on the left side, and it results in different levels of appropriation, as displayed on the right side. Based on what is an individual experience, according to Hassenthal and Traktinsky, we considered the following aspects of experiences in theater settings. First, the emotions and cognition, including expectations of all stakeholders who are in contact with the wearable costume. Second, the physical sensation of wearing a costume, in particular wearability factors. Third, the design of the costume, its system architecture, interaction design, and intended usage. And fourth, the systematic and contextual structures of the theater setting, in which the wearable costume is deployed. Based on the theoretical framework of Karapanios and colleagues, we expected the following types of appropriation. A. Familiarity effects that arise in the first phase of orientation through early contact with an interactive costume. Next, B. We expected functional dependency effects to occur when stakeholders incorporate them into their working routines. And finally, C. The highest form of appropriation should arise when the garment becomes part of the stakeholder's identity and results in emotional attachment effects. So what did we find? Our data suggests that it is not an experience, but a set of experiences that stakeholders for interactive costuming go through over time. We cluster these experiences into how wearing an interactive costume feels. Here the focus was mainly on the wearability and that the costume wearers feel disguised. How stakeholders perceive the technology. Here we found that levels of trust in technology differ depending on the stakeholders' backgrounds and their trust in the technology. Further, how a performance is influenced by the costume depends on its performative freedom and the interaction mode. Here we found that explicit interaction of the SIGCHI required more rehearsal time than the seahorse and jellyfish costumes that were based on implicit interaction. It also diverges how the special features of the costumes are perceived. Most people thought it is a highlight for a performance show, but a few professionals perceived it as just another piece of technology. And the last experience to address here is how interactive costuming changes work routines in a theater environment. It definitively challenges the existing theater ecology. It is perceived more time-consuming and perceived harder than it is the case for usual costuming. Based on the stakeholders' experiences, we observed 5 types of appropriation of wearable costuming, as it's shown in this graphic. On the first level, we found that all stakeholders and all wearers became familiar with the technology over time, as it was expected. In addition, we found professional reserve effects for stakeholders who did not spend much time with the finished costumes. For instance, the tailoring team, they were only involved in the wearable costuming or in the technologies while crafting the SIGCHI costume, and they formed less connection with the final costume then. On the next level, we found what we expected as well, functional dependency effects for primary and secondary stakeholders. Beyond, we found what we call polite indifference. This appeared for interactive costume wearers, and it differs from professional reserve because it only occurred for primary stakeholders. In contrast, stakeholders who were professionally reserved were tertiary stakeholders and had not shown familiarization effects before. And on the highest level, we found emotional attachment. But other than expected, only one jellyfish dancer was more than fascinated by the costume, and she seemed to identify herself as a performer through that costume. Based on that, we believe that the key driver of felt ownership of wearable costuming is emotional attachment. Also, it seemed to appear less often in professional contexts. Finally, what we can say is that appropriation increases from level 1 to 3, so from outer to inner circle. And it depends on a range of factors, such as closeness to the costume or its interaction modality, and personal or social factors. We can confirm the findings of prior research, and we discovered professional reserve and polite indifference effects. These two appropriation types are likely to appear only for stakeholders in professional areas, where the deployment of wearable technologies is not necessarily voluntary for all stakeholders. The experiencing and appropriating types that we just described are not static. Rather, they should be understood as an ongoing process of experiences and continuous development of appropriating interactive costuming. Our findings suggest that appropriating technology is different in professional contexts, depending on whether the use of technology is voluntary, on the stakeholder's background, on their closeness to the technology, or on the type of interaction and further contextual influences. We therefore suggest an early and stress-free integration of interactive costuming into existing practices of the stakeholders, for instance through participatory design processes or rehearsing prototypes. In contrast to appropriating technologies in other contexts, we further suggest to design for the show instead of designing for the self, because an interactive costume and all its stakeholders are always part of an overall production and the performance show. And finally, familiarization needs time and is normally based on lots of positive experiences. Thus, introducing interactive costuming should provide positive experiences, and costume creators should, for instance, avoid tests with the stakeholders when the technology is not yet ready. Since my time is over now, I would refer to our paper and the discussion we started there on the relevance of our findings for other professional fields that make also use of wearable applications. Thanks for your attention.